they have built up over all those years they have sacrificed, all those hours they have spent with you, we think that is the most closest approximation to proportional representation. The second argument then, how you restore the relationship and the well-being of both parent and child. I'll take you later. First, we want to highlight what is the most realistic context. I'll be engaging with all spectrums of relationships throughout the argument. We're going to highlight what is the most realistic context, the most realistic relationship for this debate. Firstly, as mentioned, the motion assumes that the kids want to help their parents to some extent, so it cannot be excessively toxic. It may not be perfect. Maybe you can't perfectly relate to these individuals, but at the very least, it's not a toxic relationship, or this debate would not be occurring in the first place. But secondly, even if there was tension in childhood, we would like to highlight that more realistically, you are more mature now because you are an adult. So even if your initial relationship was somewhat toxic, you have grown up, you have learned how apologies work, you understand the mistakes your parents made because you have taken 8-hour jobs and looked at your own kids and wondered how to care for them. You have learned the exact experiences your parents have experienced, so we think it's more likely you are more mature and more likely that in the vast majority of instances, you'll be able to talk with your parents, you'll be able to reconcile to a large extent, even the worst case. So that's the most realistic characterizations and the two reasons why it's realistic. Now, let's analyze all three stakeholders of this debate, and I'll show you systematically why we win all of them. Firstly, sit down. Why relationships are better in and of itself. We want to highlight that this alone is a stakeholder. We think both sides are probably going to compete with who gets the better relationship. Three levels of analysis why relationships are elevated and better on our side. Firstly, we say that being able to witness the vulnerability and experiences firsthand of each other's suffering, we say that you are going to foster better empathy. We want to highlight, for you to build an effective relationship, or even just a bare minimum sufficient relationship with your parents or with your children, you need to be able to see them. You need to be able to humanize them. You that demands interaction, or you simply cannot empathize with these individuals. When you can see that your child is working 8 hours a day and is undergoing tremendous stress, that's when you'll be able to empathize with them better. When your child is able to see that the parents are literally rotting away, that they're probably going to die within 5 years, that the announcement from their doctor was extremely devastating, that's when you empathize with your parents. So let's engage that into the spectrum that they're probably going to offer us. For good relationships, which as mentioned are the majority of instances, that's what makes the relationship even better. It brings out the best in both parties as they empathize further. But in the worst case, let's engage with bad relationships that are somewhat toxic or not as great. We say that if you really hate your parents that much, then every time you give them a donation, you will still hate your parents. In fact, every time you give a donation, you will feel even worse that you're spending money on them. That means that the emotion will always be consistently festering within you. It gets worse, and it goes on indefinitely, so the harms keep accruing on their side. Sit down. The comparative on our side is that we give you a much higher chance to actually reconcile with your parents because you understand them better when you see them. You are able to communicate with them because you have to communicate with them. They're more likely to take efforts to communicate with you because you are interacting with them and you can empathize. That restores the relationship. That means that there's a definite end to the suffering that you are going to experience, to the amount of trauma. It no longer festers, it is resolved. Yes?
Your parents consented to have you, but you did not consent to be born. Why does relationship necessarily have to be proportional in nature?
Look, consent is not something that has to occur on this debate, because if you assume that the child did not consent to be born and owes no obligation, you have broken the debate because you owe no financial responsibility to these parents. This debate has to assume that the kids believe there's a principle. So even if there isn't a principle in reality, the kids believe so, the debate assumes so, engage in the real world, engage in the motion. The second level of why relationships are better. In our world, societal structures have evolved to facilitate relationships. That means you have counselors, that means you have advice from friends, from books, from support groups that are specifically designed to facilitate less healthy relationships and how to reconcile with your parents as they live in your home. We report to the example of Chinese communities in the past that forced you to be left in your home, coerce you occasionally to live with your parents, but overall it becomes better over time because the support structures are already in place to encourage that. The third level as to why relationships are better is that the parents actually treat you better from the get-go. So in the worst case, where these parents are self-interested, we think that makes things even worse because you have no reason to care for your child because you know that they're going to reject you no matter what happens, so why would you want to invest time in them in the first place? So the second thing we want to highlight is that if you're entirely self-interested, that means you will simply work harder, you will simply work so that you can develop savings for the nursing home that you will eventually turn to. That means you get even less time with your child, that lowers the relationship, that makes things even worse in the worst context. That's how we engage with their side. But the second stakeholder, and the most valuable one, are the parents. We say they are the most vulnerable and important because they are old, they are neglected by welfare, they are often rejected by society because they just simply cannot interact with enough people and have no power. We say you damn them to nursing homes, where they are isolated from their family, where they feel like they have wasted their lives, all 30 years they spent with their children, pouring time, money, contribution, and a lot of these resources into their child, all wasted. We say this leads to a spiral of mental health, like depression and suicide rates, how it's rampant among nursing homes, and how often the facilities are not extremely well developed, because you can't neglect these people since they have no power to resist that. That damns them to an even worse fate that is principally unfair. Proud to support us.
Speakers spoke for 8 minutes and 16 seconds. 8-1-6.
I thank the first proposition speaker, and I would like to recognize the first opposition speaker to open the office in this case here.
You know, I don't want to take a stern kind of parental tone with the government, but I think that they really should have thought about their case a little bit more. Because what they say is all of these relationships are in the best case scenario. These are relationships in which we have great bonds with families, in which they work really hard to cultivate great relationships. But then they also say, our main benefit is going to be marginally improving those relationships. I think it's a very big strategic mistake for the government to bank their entire case on the marginal benefit to the marginal amount of parents. I'm going to do two things in this speech. First, a rebuttal on what we get out of the government. Then secondly, I'm going to move into our constructive case, talking about firstly why you in fact strain those parental relationships that they talk about. Secondly though, how you worsen elderly care for the vast majority of people, because not everyone is encompassed by this policy. And then Max is going to talk about feminism and how we can improve the lives of women at home. So then, firstly on rebuttal. They say first, principally, we should have proportional compensation for what parents do. We say one, like this is absolutely not proportional to what parents do, because time doesn't mean good outcomes. Just because someone spends a lot of time on a kid doesn't mean they're spending good time or doing good things to that kid. Ultimately, we would say then that this claim falls into practicality, because if you give a child a good quality of life, if that child is happy, we put it to you that you owe the same amount to that child, or that child owes the same amount to you, as if you spent hours and hours on that child, yet you got nothing out of it. So we think, if we prove to you that we get a better relationship, or if we get a better quality of life for the children and the parents, then we win on the theme of principle. They then say, we're going to get better relationships, because one, we're only talking about the best case relationships already. I'm going to tell you more in constructive about how that's absolutely not true. How because of the societal pressure that exists on both sides of the house to take children in, what you're likely to have happen is you're likely to have to take in parents who are emotionally or physically abusive to you, because those are the immense societal pressures placed on people, especially in large parts of the world. So I'm going to engage with that. They then say, because of the vulnerability of parents, you're going to get a new relationship with the parents. Honestly, panel, I don't think it's very helpful for a child to see their mother going down the spiral of dementia, understanding every day that she's weakening. I don't think that's helpful for the emotional stability of a child who has to go to work every single day, knowing at home they're not able to care for their mother, who cannot care for themselves anymore. For the child who has to now change the diaper of their mother, see them in a weakened state, understand that they can do absolutely nothing to help them in the way that state welfare could. We put it to you that that's absolutely not helpful for the relationship. Again, I'll explain that a little bit more in constructive. They then say, well, you're going to get better bad relationships because, well, you still have to pay on our side of the house. Well, you don't have to be in the room with the person who's mentally abusing you or looks down on you because you're gay. We allow people to escape from the jail that is their home when you have to work with a parent. They then say you can get better support structures and you can get better access from home. We say, look, you can't help parents when you have a job. I'm going to explain that more on our side of the house. Moving into constructive. Firstly, I'm going to speak about how you get strained relationships on their side of the house. I already illustrated this a bit in my argument, or in rebuttal, but we say that privacy is one of the main harms on their side of the house. Why is this the case? Because when you live with your parent, You just can't do things that you would normally do. You have to live behind a veil of secrecy so as to not show your parent what's going on in your home, because ultimately people don't want to see or let their parents see a lot of the stuff they do. I'm not going to mention those things because that would be appropriate in a debate, but there's a lot of stuff that people do that they don't want their parents knowing about that is extremely embarrassing. But furthermore, a parent might not want their child to see them having to change their diaper in such a weakened state. We think that puts an immense strain on the relationship when there's that veil of secrecy surrounding it. Secondly, though, we think that it overburdens a person when they not only have to pay for care, but they also have to be around their parent 24/7. They have to change their diaper. They have to feed them constantly. They maybe have to take time off work in order to provide for that family. We think that overburdens them. And secondly, there's also the question of who among siblings cares for them, right? Because there's a lot of argument in this. Maybe it's the person who makes the most money. Maybe it's the person who doesn't have a job. Given that there's this kind of tension within the family, we think there's actually going to increase familial tensions to the point at which you have to argue and bicker about who has to care for the person. This immense burden on these people. Thirdly, though, we say it decreases the ability of the child to move. For example, if a child wants to get a new job in a new city, they can no longer do that on their side of the house because they have to care for a parent who is extremely immobile, who is extremely unadaptable, and maybe they're 90s or something. What this means is children can't make crucial life decisions that they would be able to on our side of the house, meaning the children and parent relationships get tense because the parents are now literally the reason that a child cannot make more money, literally the reason that a child cannot move in with his relationship or have a better life for themselves. So they strain that relationship when they make the parent the reason of the child's suffering. Sure.
If you agree that reciprocity is important, how are your arguments on the sacrifice of children not analogous to the sacrifice of a parent?
The argument is about
to take away the child.
I understand. So the argument is about the relationship between the child and the parent. The point at which that relationship is awful, that absolutely undercuts all of their benefits, because that relationship is awful, their main benefit, then they lose this round. So then, why do we actually have to debate about the bad cases for relationships? As I told you in rebuttal, this is a case in which there's immense social pressure. This is an immense social norm. They have to have that if they want to get their mass societal benefits of having good parental relationships. What this means is there is a social norm that you have to take your parent in. This means that in cases of mild to even severe emotional punishment by parents, what happens is you have to take that person in now, because if not, you'll be looked down upon by the rest of society, looked down on by your family, looked down on by your friends. What this means is the parent, the child rather, who is verbally abused by their parent every single day for being gay, now has to take that parent in, now has to live with that verbal abuse, be prisoned with that parent for the rest of that parent's life. On our side of the house, we give them the way out. We allow them to say, no, we're going to put you in this home because you have verbally abused me for so long, because you've been so harmful to me. They don't allow that family a way of getting out of that extremely unfortunate situation. The impact of this is one, that you strain relationships even further. So if that's the impact they hang their hat on, then they lose this debate. Secondly, though, in the worst case scenarios, which have the most magnitude on our side of the house, you get people emotionally and verbally abused. You get people who are no longer happy and can no longer be happy because their parents are forced to live with them. Moving on to our second argument, I'd like to talk about worsening elderly services. We say on our side of the house, you get an impetus for governments as well as an impetus for private organizations to increase the quality of elderly services. On governments, we say it increases quality because when there is a mass amount of people who have to spend some money on elderly services, they have an incentive, and this is generally the middle class or lower middle class, who have some lobbying power, especially in municipal governments that often control the kind of elderly care that we're talking about. You have an incentive to lobby and vote on issues such as elderly care. What this means for the vast majority of people, you're going to decrease costs when you can do things like tax breaks if you put your family member within elderly care. Crucially though, even if we're only talking about private elderly care, that can only exist when there's a critical mass of people to fuel it, because it's collective. The only reason you can get such low costs in many cases for elderly care is because you can collectivize things. So you can buy massive amounts of food, or you can buy massive amounts of medicine, or you can buy things like cancer treatments that you can actually have on site at many retirement homes because you can collectivize the costs. What this crucially means is for people who just don't have family members, who don't have kids, you can get a retirement home because there's no longer the requirement that you go with your kid. So for that, a huge amount of people actually get a home on our side of the house. But secondly, for people who in the status quo cannot afford to do either measure, now there's an out for them. Now there's government funding in many cases to get elderly care. This is a massive benefit because those are often the least advantaged people already. So you can get that benefit on our side of the house. But furthermore, you just get massive benefits to the elderly involved. And this clashes with their last argument that they said in like the last 10 minutes of their speech, when they talked about how the elderly are going to be extremely lonely when they're at these elderly places. We say they're a lot less lonely than when they're with only one person who they're probably going to pay. But furthermore, you can have things like collective art classes, or you can have things like meeting new people. Often, in fact, when you're at a relationship, or when you're at a retirement home, you even meet someone and get into a new relationship after your partner has died, right? So you can have this kind of collective benefits. You can have kind of medicine that is collective when you have the amount of money to afford those services. Crucially, on their side of the house, they lock people out of having good relationships. They lock people out of having crucial services. And we're very proud of those. Thank you.
Speaker spoke for 8 minutes and 13 seconds. 1:30.
And that's the first proposition speaker, and I would like to invite the second proposition speaker.
But after some gets their phone on silent, I'm hearing a lot of pings. Can you make sure their phones are on silent? Just because we don't want anyone getting confused about whether that's a bang or the knock or anything. That would be helpful. Thank you.
For individuals who dedicated their lives in raising you, that the only way in which you can show gratitude under the side of opposition is just to do your minimal, we will say that's moral abhorrence. For problems and potential conflict, yet opposition's solution to that is to say, keep spiraling their resentment and keep hating upon your parents by not trying to reconcile with them. They are the side that stops potential problematic relationships from being resolved. Because they accuse the entire bench that we're stopping good relationships from being, that we're stopping children from reconciling with their parents. Yet the only way in which they propose is an exact solution that divides and cements the division between children and parents. Sure, we recognize that there are problematic parental-children relationships out there, but there are two things I want to say to this. First is that this is not the vast majority of this debate, because this essentially frames, this is their best case scenario, whereby every single parental-children relationship is essentially harmful. If that were true, then I don't think children will make the choice to want to fund their parents to begin with. I think the vast majority of individuals are good parental and children relationships. That's the context in which this debate has to take place in. Second is that if potentially all of these relationships are problematic, then I think the resolution to solving that isn't to further spiral yourself in that sentiment of resentment, but try to reconcile with your parents, especially with the nuance in which we gave you. At the moment in which children grow up, there's a bigger sense for you to be able to empathize. That the main reason as to why you were self-centered as a children, because you couldn't see the world and the boundaries beyond who you were at a point in time. But when you grow up to be adult children, the ability for you to empathize is even better, and that's the ability for you to reconcile and have better relationships under this side of the house. That side of the house fails problematic relationships as a whole. I have three questions in terms of engaging with this debate. First, is there an obligation for adult children to live with their parents? Second, how is propositions more better for parental-children relationship? Third, how does this affect the child after parents have passed? And this is important, especially in the pragmatic outcomes. But before that, I accept rebuttals to be integrated, but before that, several that don't fit in. Firstly, the first opposition speaker said that by having children fund parents, then this will also essentially improve welfare systems, because private actors can come in, and there's more political lobbying for us to have better support for parents. First, I want to say that's not exclusive, because all of this can be better under our side as well. Second, I would say it's even better under the side of proposition, because it forces that interaction, which forces that understanding of what actually are the struggles of their parents. Because under the side of opposition, recognize the entire characterization is, oh, your parents are problematic, and the only way in which you want to care for them is put them in nursing homes. Where's your interaction? Where's your ability to understand? Where's your ability to humanize? What is the incentive for children to actually want to politically lobby for parents, given that they are problematic, and the only resolution is in which they propose is screw all of those problems, push them away? Where's the incentive for political lobbying to happen? I think the incentive only comes from our side, when there's interaction that could potentially be positive, and I think that's the one which guarantees better welfare systems and better healthcare systems for the elderly. Second, on social pressure, there are two responses I want to say to this also. First is that individuals who essentially want to reconcile with their parents by taking in their parents will also face the same pressure under the side of opposition. This is not an exclusive harm. But second, we would say that the gay individuals who want to reconcile with their homophobic parents will also be forced to resent their parents even more under that side of the house, because you force this person to not be able to reconcile with their parents. The only way in which reconciliation can happen is when that person is able to take in their parents and have positive interactions with them. So under that side of the house, recognize that there's no solution to the problem of homophobia, there's no solution to the resentment of the children, but their only solution is you should only spiral down the resentment even more. We say that's the side of the house, there's more harm than good. Thirdly, on children being traumatized by helping their parents, parents, etc. There are three things to this. First is that welfare systems aren't necessarily great. Also, not everybody comes from Canada. I think the vast majority of the world lives in worlds like Malaysia, and I don't think our healthcare systems are definitely that great. Also, second, I would say that recognizing that their parents are dying, that recognizing that their parents are going through a lot of struggles, yet the only way in which the opposition would say in dealing with this is, never mind, let your parents just solve it themselves. If it's true that helping your parents is traumatizing towards yourself, then I think as a child who has a relationship with your parents, ditching your parents as a whole is even more traumatic with your parents. Then they say, oh, there's no privacy and you don't respect privacy because it might potentially traumatize children and their parents. Then the privacy arguments only harm their case even more when the parents are forced to go through treatment by strangers, when there's no interaction and when there's no connection and relationship with their children. You only harm children and parents even more. But thirdly, recognizing that the child was also in such a position in which they want to, recognizing that the child was also in a position in which were their parents before. And this essentially leads you to my first question, is there an obligation for adult children to live with their parents? We would say this is a closest approximation of the principle of reciprocity, because recognizing the characterization that came from their side of the house, it means financial support, it means emotional support, it means that when your parents are sick, you also have to take care of your parents, potentially changing their diapers. The question that we have to ask them is that if all of this is your characterization, then how is it different from your parents taking care of your child when you were in the beginning, when you were just starting to live your life? I'd say it's the same, and that's exactly why we need to have the moral obligation in caring for your children, because the nuance that is important here, in which they didn't bother to respond at all, is that parents have done above and beyond for their children, and it's far more from just financial support. It looks like taking maternity leave in order to take care of your children. It looks like spending family time, like taking your children to movies, emotionally supporting them and emotionally guiding them. It looks like participating in your graduation, even though their parents might potentially be busy with work and finding money in order to raise their family. It proves essentially that this is a principle of reciprocity, and it leads you into my second level, especially when their parents are in the position of their children, when they are unable to fend for themselves, when they are as vulnerable as children as they were beginning. I think it's even pertinent for us to recognize that it's the moral obligation for children to fend for their parents and to support their parents as a whole. This is a principle of reciprocity, and in absence of that, it's probably just negligence. We would say children have a moral obligation to reciprocate the kind of benefit that parents have done, and opposition is just a cop-out and disingenuous version of that reciprocity. But before I move on, sure.
If a parent can't or doesn't want to take care of a child, they can put them up for adoption. Why can't children do the same?
I will explain this in my second argument. Essentially, if that's the entire narrative in which type of opposition wants to fight for, then it only further cements a narrative that parents don't necessarily have to care for their child even more, and that's potentially wrong. Second question, how is Proposition's more better for parental-children relationship? And this is when they accuse us for only having marginal benefits. I will disagree with that. First, for good parental-children relationship, this is far more fulfilling because it's a continuation of the relationship that happens between parents and children, which means to say we further cement what happens in the vast majority of cases, i.e. good parental relationships. Second, how is this better relationship even though it may be problematic? Three levels to this. First is that the maturing of children is much better in order to bridge that empathy gap. Is that when you're young, your world only revolves around you, but when you're older, it's likely that you're able to empathize with your parents even more. And that's the main reason as to why we see a lot of problematic teenage relationships improve as they grow older, because we recognize that there's a better ability for you to empathize with your children, with your parents. But second, we also say that through interaction and communication, you will essentially humanize your parents even more. Essentially, it branched out into two things. First is that if you have a good relationship, it further fulfills you and it gives you a better sense of fulfillment. But secondly, when it comes to a problematic relationship, rather than going away from that resentment and rather than spiraling down that resentment, we would say you are much able to contain that resentment as a whole and much better able to resolve that resentment by humanizing your parents as a whole. Thirdly, this also affects the entire narrative of parental relationships, because in a world in which it only works on side opposition, then there's less of an incentive for parents to truly care for their children, given that their children are likely to care for them at the end. But you have to recognize that when your parents essentially pass, you are left with a question as to whether you have done enough for your parents or not. And the moment in which you will side with side opposition, you only trap the children in a perpetual cycle of regret, in which they cannot opt out from, in which they constantly question and doubt that they have not done enough, and that is not a world that is beneficial for relationships or mental health as a whole. Proud to propose.
I'd like the second opposition speaker, and I would like to invite the second opposition speaker here.
go to prep with my teammates, maybe 100 times, I can attest that close proximity causes a lot of fighting. That is the premise of the opposition case, along with a lot of other cool political benefits that were not responded to whatsoever by their side of the house. So, 2 questions I want to ask in this speech. First, which side benefits the elderly the most? Because we're going to win on the grounds of assuming that obligation exists, but also defeat the idea that that obligation would exist in the first place. Second, which side is best for society overall, in which I'll incorporate an argument about how their side continues the subjugation of women. First, let's talk about which side benefits the elderly the most. A number of things come out of their side. The first and biggest practical argument that they want to push down their bench is that in cases where you have conflict with your parents, don't understand your parents, now you move in together and everything gets great. The first thing I want to point out about this argument is that this is extremely tense with the debate that Proposition wanted to have. And the reason why is this. Prop tells us that this debate likely occurs in places where you have a good relationship with your parents, because that is where you are incentivized to take them in or to pay for their retirement home. But if you already have a good relationship with your parents, I don't really understand where the benefit of reconciliation comes from their side of the house, because then where's the change if you already have a great relationship? We pointed that tension out at first, and I've yet to hear a sufficient response to it. But I want to point out a number of other things about their case. All of it is hot. Here's why. The principle is about reciprocity. But if the reciprocity is not good, then it does not thank you. Then it does thank you. Not all good at the same time. Then it does not approximate what kind of obligation should be owed at all. Their third argument is about why when your parents die, you're going to come to regret what occurs if you didn't do well for them. But if we can prove to you that you get more benefits for your parents on our side of the house, that argument is also defeated because it's all hung on their central mechanism of reconciliation and close intimate ties. So if we can defeat that, all 3 arguments from Proposition are done in this debate. So let's talk about a number of things then. First, their argument on reciprocity. I want to point out that the main link they have here is that your parents spend a lot of time on you, and therefore you should try to approximate it. Principle of reciprocity can never be true. The question is then, how true ought it be? Yeah.
If no principle of reciprocity exists, then would you stop giving money to parents entirely?
No, we think people should be good and support their parents because that's a nice thing to do and will cause your life to be great. And also we do think that, in general, there might be some degree of reciprocity that you can have, taking prop at their best. We think that's probably not true, but we'll debate on their grounds. Our entire case proves why we result in better lives for these elderly individuals, something that prop still doesn't want to engage with. So that principle is not very relevant to the ground. Okay, 2 other things that they say. First, they say that we have a Canadian-centric focus because in most cases, we're not going to get our political benefits, this moves us on in society now, because healthcare systems aren't great. But that misses the point of the argument. The point of the argument was that those systems, if they are bad now, get significantly better. A number of mechanisms that weren't refuted in their case. First off, we pointed out that when you have a single understand from Malaysia why it is, that the second you move in together, those deep-seated disputes probably about the moral value, maybe you went off to chase money somewhere on the other side of the world, are going to get resolved and provide you with no mechanism for how that occurs. No thank you to both of you. Okay, number of things that they say after that. It forces interaction to understand issues, so we get people voting to understand the elderly. But the problem isn't that people don't understand that the elderly need support. Everyone understands that the elderly need support. The problem is one of capacity. The problem is one of inertia with states not funding these services. So even if on their side we understand the issues of the elderly more, that doesn't matter if it doesn't result in state subsidies for retirement homes, state subsidies for assisted living, and tax benefits, for example, for these families. We get that on our side of the house, so each dollar is spent in a more effective way, which is the critical way. Okay, a number of other things that they tell you here. Actually, there's not very much left because there's not too many impacts coming out of the problem. Other than that, let's move on to constructive. This argument is really, really important in the debate. And the reason why is that women who are presently adults or presently teenagers are one day going to become elderly. This affects literally everyone, or well, half the population. So let's get into the argument then about why this burden of care on their side is going to fall disproportionately on women. Obviously, under our alternatives of assisted living or retirement homes, the burden is split evenly among people who are being employed for the purpose of taking care of the elderly. If we can prove to you in this round that they destroy the careers of millions of women on their side of the house, nothing else in this round matters because the big benefit of reconciliation doesn't really stand for the reasons I highlight and also because this argument is hugely impactful. So, notice that under their side of the house, one adult has to stay at home in order for them to get their benefits. Why? Because they're making less money in her career, which provides an added reason for why she is likely to stay at home. What is the impact of their side of the house? Even if they can prove that, they'll come back and say women are going to get back into their careers after their parent passes away, their careers are permanently stunted. They've lost out on the industry. Their training is gone. They've had large professional development that they lack, and they don't get promotions. But furthermore, and this is massive, women are seen as liabilities in hiring and in the workplace on their side of the house. In the same way that women are liabilities from maternity leave, they are seen as liabilities because now, for perhaps 20 years of their life, while their parent is dying of cancer or faces dementia or Alzheimer's, they could be out of the workplace and taking care of them. Prop cannot mitigate this argument in this round because that will cut into all of their benefits of social interaction, all of their benefits of care. So we're really interested to see how they deal with this. Because Prop massively contributes to the ongoing subjugation of women, they can't win this round. And even if you think some kind of reciprocal obligation exists, we not only prove that lives are better with social interactions and specialized services, and because the elderly are finally sociable instead of being locked away in homes, and also because of the funding that we get. We are so proud to oppose.
Sorry, can I just ask people to check again on their phones? It's still getting quite a lot of pings. We're obviously very popular in here, which is great for you, might have gone on once. But yeah, please check them. It's really, really distracting for the speakers.
Speakers spoke for 8 minutes and 16 seconds. 8:16.
I'd like the second opposition speaker, and I would like to.
You know, Team Canada has lost when in a parenting debate, they give you a feminist argument which they ran for 2 minutes in their speech. Quite frankly, let's deal with this specific argument first. A is a problem-solution mismatch. The patriarchal structures and the narratives behind those structures still don't get solved on their side of the house, even if they simply send their parents to an elderly foster care home, for example. But also note the extreme characterizations they had in a specific argument. That is to say, the reason why the argument exists on their side is because the women will be the ones that will be forced to stay at home to care for their parent. This isn't reality. Even when you look at the way parents care for their child, it's about sending the child to a babysitter, sending a child to a school in the period of time in which they are working, and then coming back together to care for the child. But then the very same will exist on our side of the house by sending a nurse to accommodate for the parent when you are working, and then only coming back and taking care of them. The nuance is at the very least on a daily basis there is interaction among parents and children. That is why the argument falls from the very start. The entire second we are principally against literally sending the child off for adoption because you are allowing the child to spiral off to a worse quality of life, suffering from emotional neglect and all these structural harms. We are principally against that. We say on your side of the house, we have to answer why it is justified as well. The first issue of debate on the issue of welfare. I think it's disingenuous or side carrot talk about how welfare systems are intrinsically able to work in every single society that analyzing structural reasons as to why. Because welfare as a system has a lot of branches. Welfare for your students, welfare for individuals in working colonies, welfare for the poor. Individuals have a basket of issues and politicians are unable to cater to all issues. In a specific nuance, people still argue to prioritize the main issues like having economic development, i.e. having pension, i.e. having like tax subsidies for the poor, for example. Those are still the issues in which your welfare policies are going to end up prioritizing. We don't see how we get the political capital to care for the elderly. But specifically, we told you why you legitimately decrease your political capital at the point in which you have less individuals caring about their parents and thereby less likely to go lobby, less likely to go protest, less likely to vote for politicians that actually want to provide those welfare policies as a whole. Because crucially, the prerequisite to having those mechanisms is to have empathy for your parents to care for their structural harms. And you only achieve that when you have the visceral images of living with them day by day. No response from second speaker. They lose the argument. And all the second issues on straining relationships. The first thing they say is that your privacy is harmed because you want to do some specific things. Guys, you can do that, just go to your room and close the door. Second, they say you overburden children at the point in which you have to care for their parents at every single point of their lives. We told you there are mechanisms like nursing home, nursing for example, hiring a nurse for example, so this is legitimately mitigated to a large extent. But also we flip it upon them, because we say reciprocity is important and we concede that there should be a degree of reciprocity. So when we start, the issues of overburdening children will be very same as the sacrifices that every single parent has made. I.e., parents who chose to sacrifice a day of their job to watch you in a football game, for example. We think those are the forms of overburdening which parents were also forced to sustain. You have to engage as to why. That doesn't need to be reciprocated in your work. You have no analysis and no nuance as to why. The second thing we said about this is that there's a social normative debt. That if you don't care for your parents and don't take them in, you will be shamed. I think quite frankly, you're absolutely okay with the vast majority of instances, because if you have a good relationship, we say you should take the burden to care for your a parent and to take them in. So this is second engagement on the toxic relationships to a large extent. The first thing I'll say is that there are examples extremely extreme, i.e. parents who are homophobic towards a child, who sexually or maybe like emotionally and domestically abuse a child, for example. I think under these circumstances, we had no structural reason as to why a child would even want to provide some level of financial care or some level of financial reciprocity for the parent, considering their characterization to be extreme. This means the very stakeholder they choose to center debate upon in both speeches are essentially an extreme minority in this debate and are unlikely to be affected by the emotion as a whole. We say let's disregard it on the spot. But let's be try to engage as whole, right? So the nuances to homophobic parents and how these individuals are structurally able to change is by achieving a process of reconciliation. That is to say, as of the status quo, you have Christian parents that are going to be convenient selective in the respect of their ideologies. So these are individuals that don't practice Christianity are still able to accept gay individuals, for example. That's why some Christian parents accepting their gay children. The only world in which you're able to achieve that is in a world in which the parents are able to structurally understand the life of the child and how their sexuality and their orientation is something that's intrinsic to their humanity. You only achieve this world at the point in which you force positive interactions, you allow a parent to sympathize with a child and to look at the expression of the child when they choose to shame them with their sexuality. Only on hours of the house you create an interaction which forges the possibility of the life of the relationship to change in terms of dynamic. Even on the worst case scenario, the most convenient stakeholder will start opposition. We take this debate. We can move on and if you want.
A woman is offered a job in another country at double the salary. Would opposition say that she has a principled or practical obligation to not take that, stay at home and take care of her parent who has dementia? If so, how can we do that?
I took down your feminist argument from the very start by saying that the contextualization and characterization of how it materializes is simply untrue. Your women or your parents or your adult children won't sacrifice their entire job just to sustain the lives of their parents every single day 24/7, but it's more likely like hiring a nurse when they are working and then coming back and caring for that child and caring for that parent the same way parents would be saved by sending children to school, sending children to kindergartens and having daycare services and then coming back after to care for the child. You need to debunk that engineering for the past 30 years were forgotten and they were all done for nothing and the point the child chose not to care for them back. This means the combination of numerous individuals with that form of psyche only worsens individuals within the elderly home as a whole. When you perpetuate the psyche, you perpetuate the narrative. When every single conversation in the elderly home talks about how the parents had been neglected by the child and that worsens the situation as the status quo. That is why the rates of suicide and the rates of depression in first world countries where elderly homes are the most prevalent is the highest among the world. You have to engage on those specific nuances and the characterizations on that side. But in third, on the principle of reciprocity, I think it's important for us to concede that it isn't possible for us to all achieve a full proportional commensurable form of reciprocation. But at least when both of us concede that reciprocity is important, who then better achieves the closest approximation to reciprocity? The side that chooses not to abandon parents, that chooses to have them in their homes, to have conversations, to talk with them, and to sympathize and empathize with individuals, or the side that simply chooses to send them off after 30 years of sacrifice to an elderly home in which you have no financial, in which you have no emotional or structural support. We think that's regrettable side and proposition.
Speakers go for 8 minutes and 4 seconds. 8, 1, 2.
I thank the third opposition speaker, and I would like to call on the third opposition speaker to conclude the opposition speech.
I'm going to be talking about 3 things in this speech. Firstly, I want to weigh the feminist argument from our side of the house and deal with the incredibly flippant responses that we get. Secondly, I want to talk about why we are better for relationships in the vast majority of cases. And finally, why our side of the house is actually able to guarantee housing options for the elderly. On the first question about how our side of the house is far better for women. And second, we presented an argument that women are substantially going to have to deal with the burden sharing of this policy. We get a couple responses. Firstly, they say that patriarchal structures are still going to exist. We agree with that. We're simply saying that this policy is a horrific manifestation of the patriarchy. Secondly, they said that a nurse can come and care for parents. That, however, will not apply for a couple reasons. Firstly, because a lot of parents are unable to afford nursing. Even if you're only paying someone minimum wage, when you're literally doing this every single day for a period of years, this is going to be an additional massive financial toll on your family, meaning that particularly for lower middle-class families, this is going to be a major expense for you and you'll be unable to turn to that option. But secondly, a lot of case on the basis of this argument. I now want to get though into the second claim about who was actually better for relationships. Before I characterize different kinds of relationships in this round, I want to deal with their principle about how there's an obligation for proportionality in these cases. Our response to this is that proportionality is not inherently the kinds of relationships in this round. The first relationship I want to talk about are cases, their best case scenario, when relationships are great, but they believe we're now going to get a bit better on their side of the house. That, however, did not work for a few reasons. Firstly, it was unclear why you could not get a marvelous relationship on our side of the house as well. But you can do things like call your parents on a regular basis. But you can do things like actively visit the retirement homes. So I'm unclear about the marginal benefit of that. But secondly, in cases where parents care a lot, we're likely to do things like not relegate them to a bad nursing home that they tried to characterize in first, but actually guarantee that they have very, very suitable kind of care. But finally, in first, we explained why they create large amounts of familial infighting when you're choosing which kid to stay with. So even in cases where relationship structures are brilliant, we're still likely to get a dissolving of those family structures overall. The next case I want to talk about are normal relationships and the kind of middle cases in this round. They try to say that their side of the house is better because they're going to naturally boost empathy. That, however, falls for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it is unclear why the response as a kid this is really going to be empathy towards your parent when you see them being in a diaper continually. When you want to go out and work, when you want to earn money, but you feel shackled to them, but you continually have to care for them. In those cases, I think your most rational response may actually be a tremendous level of frustration, to infantilize them a bit more, to dehumanize them. And insofar as a lot of their benefits of political lobbying are held on that characterization of empathy, which they never actually proved was the most likely thing to emerge, a lot of their impacts there actually fall. But secondly, it was also unclear why empathy was actually exclusive to their side of the house. Because insofar as, once again, they believe that most families are good, I still think that as a child, you will genuinely care about your parents, because in most cases, you do feel some kind of gratitude that they raised you and invested so much time in you. So I still think that in the majority of cases, we get a lot of empathy on our side of the house. However, in these kind of middle cases for families, we have proved a couple of important things. Firstly, we said that privacy was often very important. They said the comparative is being treated by strangers, but in some of our most intimate moments, being treated by a stranger is actually better. This is why a lot of people often go to therapy rather than talking about their friends and the most vulnerable things. I don't think that you want to watch your kid literally see you in a diaper. But secondly, they missed a lot of their impacts when we also spoke about things about how it's a lot harder to do things like move on your side of the house, because as a kid, you're not going to want to move to a new country, even when that is literally your dream, as third concedes your social pressure, when society is literally going to shame you, tell you you're a bad kid, because you're not end up caring for your parents. So they restrict the liberty of individuals to a substantial extent. But finally, we were able to prove that one of the most important cases are those whose relationships are actively harmful in cases where relationships are generally abusive. We got a few responses. So firstly, they said that people are mature and generally able to resolve conflict. However, years of emotional scars cannot always be resolved through maturity. But every single time you see your parent, they're a literal trigger for you. This is not only about the extreme cases, but it's also the baggage that you carry when you're barricaded with microaggressions from your parents as you're growing up, when they never believed in you, when they always saw you as being a liability. It's hard to just maturely resolve this kind of conflicts. But secondly, they said that you still have to, I'll take you in a second, pay for your parents, and that is actually harmful. But they missed a couple things. Firstly, you don't have to have as much contact when you're simply paying for your parents. But secondly, this is different from continually being in a jail with your parents when you actively hate them. It's not as a free mouth, only in cases where your parents abuse you constantly. Love is often a lot more complex than that. You can still love them, but in a lot of cases, they did a lot of things to you that were actively terrible. It's bad to continually barricade you in a home with that. Go ahead.
If you consider mitigations like calling your parents or visiting them, you concede that parents intrinsically want emotional support. Why is it justified for you to deny them of the scale of support that you get on side of
So we're saying that we can get a sufficient threshold of emotional support on our side of the house, but all of the harms that we've spoken about in this round that ensue to other actors like women. So even if you buy that abuse is only a very, very marginal number of cases, we say you outweigh this familial structure incredibly highly, given the tremendous emotional impact of forcing certain kids to stay with their parents. Note crucially that their third actually concedes that social pressure is going to exist. They say that that is good. If social pressure exists, this means that a lot of kids are actually going to be staying with their parents, even in cases where they actively would not want to. You're not willing to swallow that harm under our side of the house. On the final question about how our side is able to guarantee housing options. We explained why even if their world exists, a lot of parents are not going to have somewhere to go. We give a couple reasons. Firstly, a lot of people are sometimes poor, but secondly, not all adults actively have kids. We had a couple responses to this area of argumentation and the max that we gave. Firstly, they said that not every country is like Canada and has things like affordable housing systems. But our thing is, a lot of these countries will be substantially conversation of empathy, you're not going to go to lobby for housing options if they're literally staying in your home. So our side of the house is the only side.
I thank the opposition speaker, and I would like to invite the opposition vice speaker.
Side government's case is a bit like a child that never grew up. They're naive. They say, just work out your problems. They think that everyone can just protect their parents and have the means to do so. And they think that parents and children who get along will always get along. That was naive of them. I'm going to explain that in two ways. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the parent-child relationship and the burdens that you put on people on their side of the house. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the elderly and how we can actually get massive benefits for the most vulnerable on our side of the house. Moving into the first thing. We told you, and they strawmanned this, they avoided our claims, because they said we only engaged in the worst case scenario, forgetting that literally the first substantive analysis that we gave you was about relationships that in the status quo are good. Literally point one of my speech was talking about several structural reasons as to why they corrupt those relationships on their side of the house. We told you firstly about privacy. How when you have to have the veil of secrecy surrounding all of your engagements, you don't have that kind of trust that's important in a familial relationship. We told you about how you force people to stay in the situation they currently are, because the elderly are often not very malleable, they can't move, they can't adapt in the same way that the younger person can. Notably, no response to that mechanism. Thirdly, though, we told you about how you overburden the individual and breed resentment when a child is forced to stay at home and forgo earning money, when a child is forced to work with a family where they could go with a friend, and when a child is forced to change their parent's diaper, despite the fact that it is intensely demeaning to that parent. We told the ridiculous nature of that claim down the bench. We said you ought not to be forced to stay in a prison with a person who is emotionally abusive. You ought not be forced to reconcile your differences with that person if they are homophobic and you are gay. You ought not be forced to do that on their side of the house. They force the most vulnerable to do that. We said, the most important benefit that side government hinges their entire case on, or at least from their point of view, is the parent and child relationship. We proved to them that in both scenarios, the parent-child relationship gets much worse, so on their best metric, we win this debate. But furthermore, we told you about feminism. We told you about how on their side of the house, they force women into indentured service of these parents. They say, no, but women won't be forced to go home, because you don't need to be working with the parents all the time. But we pointed out that if they want to get the vast majority of the benefits, they have to have constant connection. If meeting with the parent twice or 3 times a week isn't enough, then you have to have that constant connection and be able to work with them on a daily basis. And many families can't afford nurses. So you do get the immense societal harms of women being forced to stay home on their side of the house, not being able to combat the patriarchy, not being able to get higher wages in the future. That's immensely harmful. But on the second theme, we proved to you that the elderly are much worse off, and this contends with their principal analysis. Because if we prove that the reciprocal obligation is not met on their side of the house, then we win on that as well. They responded to only one part of our argument. They say, well, the government has many things that they ought to care about in welfare, so they're not going to be able to focus on this one. We told you down the bench, though, that they will have an incentive to care when there is a reason for them to care. So when people are lobbying, when the elderly are lobbying, note that mechanism never received any response. But a mechanism that also didn't receive any response was our collective action problem. We told you about how when there's a massive amount of people going into private elderly care services, you're actually going to get a lot more of that private elderly care. This means that you can have government subsidizes health, which means you can have people who don't have children, who don't have access to the kind of benefits that they say on their side of the house. The most vulnerable people who can't even protect them because they don't have enough money, we get the help that those.
4 minutes and 9 seconds. 409.
That would break the debate, which is exactly why their principal defense was completely wrong. On both sides, you're going to give a reciprocity. On both sides, you're going to force gay children to give out money to these parents, which breaks their entire principle, right? If you're going to make gay children call their parents as they conceded, pay active money for your parents as they conceded, then their entire principle is broken. You're still forcing them on both sides. The question is, on which side do you give the gay child a chance to actually reconcile or empathize, or not empathize, at least find some form of closure with their parents before they die? We say that's exclusively on our side of the house, and they've been extremely uncontentious throughout the entire debate. I'm going to divide my clashes into 3 main strands. Firstly, the betterment of the lives of the most vulnerable, which is the parents as they directly conceded. Secondly, which one has better relationships for both parties involved. And thirdly, I'll deal with their DLO's last-minute argument about feminism. The first one, right? The betterment of the most vulnerable or the parents. This is obviously the most important issue because this is what the entire debate is about. On comparative, the vulnerable elder person who's literally in their diapers as they characterize probably needs privacy, probably needs liberty, probably needs resources a lot more than the child, which is why even they are giving them money, right? So that's clearly the centerpiece of the debate. we say that the welfare they tell us that the welfare is going to get better. But let's compare, right? So obviously on good kids, both sides, it's not contentious. The good kids that love their parents will still give money. But then the question comes to the toxic kids, those who have bad, strained relationships with their parents. But if that is the centerpiece of the debate, then you're not going to get any benefits because these people will never change. They're segregating these people out and never actually engaging with them. Whereas on our side, at least you have a chance that you can find some closure. It's not always successful, maybe there is some strain occasionally, but you have some chance whereas they have none. But the last comparative that we want to highlight the most, they tell us that, oh, look, right, they literally can see that the parents are suffering, that they're in their diapers, that they are literally infantilized, that they have can't run entirely. Now, I'm not sure what type of person are you, but if you see a person dying before your eyes, if you see that every single day of your life, if you see a person who is literally on their diapers begging for mercy, we think the natural human response is to empathize with these individuals. The comparative on their side is that they will literally segregate them. We do not think that in South Africa you empathize with black people when you do not have to see them. We do not think on their side when you never have to see and confront the reality of their death, that their inevitable death, that you would ever empathize on their side. Our side has two comparatives. One, you have at least a chance that the toxic relationships can be healed because there's some empathy from both sides of the house. They have no chance whatsoever because they are segregated, because phone calls simply are not enough to heal relationships. Secondly, their harms are going to be cumulative and indefinite, in that every time you pay that money, you're still going to hate your parent, you're still going to hate all that strain you felt, and you'll never be able to heal it, you do not have a chance, whereas on our side, at least for some individuals, you have a chance to heal that relationship. That's why we win the relationship clash. But the second thing that we want, and that's also why we win the welfare clash, because on our side we're more likely to gather political momentum to actually change these structures in society, right? They also tell us that poor people need these sorts of welfare and they get more pressure. But A, poor people who are so poor will probably already have access to these welfare systems. And secondly, if they're going to be paying on both sides of the house, then there probably is going to be political pressure to change these systems, to ask for subsidies to take care for their parents, to ask for nurses to take care, right? That's just simply not contentious because poor people will always be lobbying when they're going to pay on both sides of the house. Lastly, engaging on their idea of feminism. Look, they can be both women and men. The motion never specified. So that means their entire contextualization is based on the idea that society is going to be sexist, that that's their only context. Whether that is the cultural norm, then that means that the women will already be denied education, will already be denied opportunities, will probably be made a homemaker the second they have a child, in which case it's really not contentious. The women are probably going to be deprived on both sides of the house, they're probably going to be homemakers on both sides of the house. That simply should not be where the debate functions. We have to assume that the debate is fair, that this occurs in places that are extremely sexist. We are more likely to win that scenario. Proud to